Yeah, it's true. It's not clickbait. I quit my sponsorship. No, there wasn't an argument or a disagreement or a fight or words exchanged or a kerfuffle or a brouhaha. Nothing really happened. The sponsorship became a point of stress for me because I didn't know what to expect of the sponsorship, and I really didn't know what the sponsorship expected of me. It was never very clear, and there wasn't a lot of communication. After sending a couple of messages to team leadership and largely going unanswered, I decided, okay, I'm done. I'm just going to go my own way. So I sent a message saying exactly that. I'm going to go my own way. I don't have any resentment or bad feelings about the brand, the batteries, or the teammates that I used to be a part of. I think they all seem online like reasonable and good people and good pilots. I just don't think the sponsorship was for me. So it's been about 7, 8 months, something of that nature, maybe a little bit longer than that. And it was actually turning it down was a bit of kind of a sad moment because I took it as a source of pride. I think that was the biggest thing that I got out of the sponsorship was kind of, I don't want to say validation, but just recognition that someone else or some group or some brand thought, hey, there's someone that we want to get behind because we like what they're doing. And I kind of thought, I think that source of pride was even larger because I don't make just flying videos, and I spend a good deal of my time making reviews, and flights are just part of that piece. And so I took it, again, as a real source of pride, I think, being one of the only reviewers to have a sponsorship. And so, leaving that behind was a bit like I was leaving a bit of the review side of me behind. And so that was a little bit of a sad thing. But long term, it's going to be what's best because it's one less thing to think about. It's one less piece of stress in my life, and I don't have any ill will towards, like I said, the pilots or the team leadership or the brand or the company. I think the batteries are good. I stand behind that. I think in the micro arena, they know who they're competing against. They know they're competing against G&B at the price point and at the performance. We'll talk about this in a minute, but that was something that came up internally. What we talked about with the micro batteries is that, this is the brand to beat. And I'd hope to be a part of that going forward, but I won't be. And so I'll just be like anyone else buying and testing different batteries for my own personal use with my own personal fun. So that takes us on to part 2, which is how do you get a sponsorship? And I've been asked this question a few times. And there's no formula for this. And I think I'm really not someone who you should seek that advice from. I've had essentially one sponsorship, and I had one other offer a while back that was quite odd. I don't know if it was just a translation issue or if they kept using the word sponsorship and meant something else, and they kept using the word team and meant something else. Anyways, it was a company I wasn't familiar with at the time, so I just kind of politely turned it down, and then a little while later, China Hobbyline came along. But the first thing I think you need to do is you have to get noticed. Whether that's be an online presence or maybe in your local race community or AMA or something, you have got to draw the attention of the individuals who either run a company that you want to be a part of, their team, or somebody who's running a team. And again, you might be able to do that through flight videos or actual races and traveling around and be a part of different parts of the FPV community. The next part of that would be you need to be probably committed to the brand in some way. You need to be someone who believes in the products that the brand is making or the company, whatever the organization is. And you probably should be a user of those items already. That will help. The last piece of that you have to probably think about is it really should be mutually beneficial. Both sides should bring something to the table of value, and that value should be equal in most cases, but it might not always be equal. Sometimes one party might feel one way or another, but it really, in the ideal world, it should be mutually beneficial. So you have to think of it in terms of this organization is going to invest in me in some way with this sponsorship, whether it's to pay for travel to go to races or to go to exotic places to fly or to provide you with equipment so you can continue to fly, what have you. And what do you bring back to that organization? So it's something to think about. Lastly, I think getting a sponsorship is going to get harder and harder, and it's going to be less and less glamorous. I think there's a lot of things in FPV that's going to start getting harder and harder and less glamorous. And we've seen it in trends. A number of different channels have talked about FPV in general, or drones in general, on how it's kind of trending downward. And that might seem like doom and gloom, but that might be just kind of the leveling off from peaks. I'm sure this next Christmas we'll see a bunch of more stuff where the Google Trends will show drones and quads trending back up, but it could be short-lived. Okay, part 3 would be to talk about the actual batteries here a little bit more. So I think these are widely known to be good performers, but they're also known to be a bit heavy for their milliamp per hour ratings. And I think they do underrate them, or excuse me, I think they do overrate them a bit. So let's just take us 450 here. Now, I think their 450s are probably the most true to form batteries I have that actually aren't under or overrated. So typically you would say, okay, for underrated, that this 450 is actually a 550, or it's a 475 or a 500 or something of that nature. That's what I mean by underrated. Whereas you have this 650 4S here, which is quite large. You can get much smaller, lighter batteries, and they perform differently. Tattoo is a brand I'm thinking of in the moment. Their batteries, you can get a 4S 850 that's probably lighter and smaller than this one, but it doesn't perform in the same manner. I think Tattoo has some work to do with their particular batteries. I think at one point in time they were pretty good, and they developed a name, but they don't seem to be keeping pace anymore. I know they have the new R line, but those don't really come in the micro format. So that's what I'm talking about. So when someone says that they're heavy, they're probably actually talking about the fact that for a 650, when you're comparing apples to apples, it is heavy. And I would agree with that. But I think there's part of the reason why they're heavier is the construction. Something that I noticed with the G&B batteries is that, and you might notice this as well, when you get to pushing them and run them hard, especially in the heat, they get kind of soft and malleable. I've got a number of them with, like you can kind of see it through there, where my battery strap has kind of dented them. Let me grab another one. Like this one might be a good case. You could actually feel this with your finger right here. That when you get to pushing them hard, especially in the heat, they get kind of soft. And when you take them off, they're warm, but they perform well. And then you're like, oh boy, why is that so soft? Because it doesn't feel the same when it's cold. And I think what is going on there is it has a little bit to do with the internal construction, as well as the chemistry that they're using, and I don't know anything about that. But one thing that I do think is the China Line hobby batteries are using a much thicker protective scheme on their batteries, because I, like this one here, I crunched it up quite a bit, and I have hammered this battery especially hard, and I have nothing like that. So I think the protective cover the China Hobby line uses is a lot better than G&B, and that's probably some of the weight. You can see right there, you've just got some foam, and I'm sure China Hobby line's got some foam in there as well. Yeah, you can see it right there. And you can see that that's flexible, but when you grab and touch and feel the batteries, and when you get them good and hot, they just don't have that same sort of kind of soft feel to them. So that's one of the differences. Let's go ahead and get the scale out here. We're going to measure two 450 4S's because I don't have apples to apples for all these different ones. We're just going to go with those. I think a big miss on the China Hobby line side, and I mentioned this right away, was they need a 550 in both 3 and 4S. The response I got was, we have 450, we have 650, and that's that. They weren't going to go with 550. 450, 650, that's what they've got. That's what they're going with. And I think that's a big miss, because a battery like this is really ideal for a lot of 3-inchers, I think. You can get a good long flight with the 550, and you don't have a lot of extra weight that you might with a 650, whereas a 450 just might not be quite enough for some pilots. So I do think there's a market that they're missing there by not going with the 550. But that's my personal opinion. Leave your comment below if you agree or not. Okay, to start, they both have my Duralock on the bottom here, so no cheating. Again, this is a 450 milliamp 4S. It's 60.43 grams, 61.41 grams, so 1 gram heavier in this one. And I think, again, when you go up to higher capacities and ratings, the difference becomes greater between a G&B versus a China Hobby line. It has something to do with scaling. And that's something else I'll add about the 4S batteries, in my opinion, at the end of the battery, don't perform as well as their 3S counterparts from G&B. The 3S counterparts, I always thought they held their kind of, for the most part, they held up right till you got down to the 3.5 volts per cell. And then you had time to go in and land. Whereas in the 4S, I find when you get down to 3.5, if you go down for any extra pass or you fly for any extra length of time, it goes down from 3.5 to 3.2 pretty dang quick. So I don't think how they're making battery scales great. I mean, the battery performs well up to that point, but when you hit that low voltage warning, and it's going to, stay consistently when you back down off the throttle, you need to come out of the air with these guys. Whereas I'll make another pass or two with these, and I've never had any problems with recharging them. So I'm no longer with China Hobby Line, and again, I wish all the teammates, the brand, and the company all the best of luck in the future. I just won't be a part of it. I will be doing my own thing here in my own little neck of the woods, and that's okay. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please leave those in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.